January 7, 1945, Zonhoven, Belgium. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery stands before a room packed with war correspondents. No notes in his hands, just that characteristic self-confidence radiating from his face. He speaks for an hour, praising American soldiers, yes, calling Eisenhower the captain of our team, certainly. But then he says it. When the situation began to deteriorate, Eisenhower placed him in command in the north. He describes how he employed the whole available power of the British Group of Armies to save the Americans. The reporters scribble frantically. Montgomery smiles. He thinks he's won. 300 miles away, in Versailles, Eisenhower's phone starts ringing. It's Bradley. His voice is shaking with rage. Within 24 hours, 2 of America's most important generals will threaten to resign. The alliance that defeated Nazi Germany teeters on the edge of collapse. And it all comes down to one sentence Eisenhower will say that changes everything. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button. These deep dives into history's most fascinating moments take serious research, and your support keeps them coming. Let me show you why this press conference almost destroyed the Allied command. September 17, 1944, 4 months earlier, Montgomery launches Operation Market Garden, the largest airborne operation in history. He promises Eisenhower he can end the war by Christmas. Just give him priority for supplies, give him resources, give him command of the thrust into Germany. In September 1944, Montgomery was made a field marshal, the highest rank in the British Army. But Market Garden fails catastrophically. 6,000 airborne Allied troops were lost trying to cross the Rhine at Arnhem. The operation that was supposed to end the war instead extends it by months. Montgomery never admits the failure. He claims the operation was 90% successful. He blames American support on the southern flank. He blames faulty intelligence. Everyone except himself. But here's what makes Montgomery dangerous. He's not just arrogant, he's often right about tactics. Montgomery was the first Allied general to inflict a decisive defeat upon the Axis forces when he drove them from their positions at El Alamein in northern Egypt. His victory there in 1942 made him a British hero. Churchill celebrated him. The British press treated him like a savior. That success poisoned him. Every victory confirmed his genius. Every failure must be someone else's fault. And now, in late 1944, he's lobbying hard for something specific. He wants permanent command of all ground forces, British and American. He wants Eisenhower reduced to an administrative rule, while he, Montgomery, runs the actual war. December 16, 1944. The Germans launch their surprise offensive through the Ardennes. The Battle of the Bulge begins. The official U.S. account lists 80,987 American casualties, while other estimates range from 70,000 to 108,000. Hitler throws everything he has left into one desperate gamble. American forces are caught completely off guard. The German advance creates a massive bulge in the Allied lines, splitting American armies. Communication breaks down. Bradley, commanding the 12th Army Group from Luxembourg, loses contact with his northern forces, General Hodge's 1st Army and General Simpson's 9th Army. December 20, 1944. Just 30 minutes before Monty was to begin an 11 a.m. conference with his 2 subordinate commanders, he received a telephone call from General Eisenhower giving him overall command of all American forces north of the Bulge. This is General Simpson's U.S. 9th Army and General Hodge's 1st Army. It's a tactical necessity. Bradley can't communicate with them. The Germans have severed the lines. Montgomery is positioned perfectly to coordinate the northern defense. Eisenhower makes the decision. Temporarily, for operational reasons only, nothing to do with American command failure. But here's the trap, and it's brilliant. Montgomery now commands American troops. He's been asking for this for months. Eisenhower gave it to him under crisis conditions. If Montgomery can prove he saved the Americans, he can argue he should keep that command permanently. This is his moment, his chance to validate everything he's been saying about American generals being inadequate. Montgomery entered the headquarters displaying his characteristic self-confidence. He immediately begins reorganizing the defense. He rushes the 29th Armored Brigade south. He establishes armored patrols between Liège and Namur. He sends the elite Special Air Service to secure the Meuse River bridges. Montgomery is doing his job, but he's also performing, making sure everyone sees how a real general handles a crisis, how British professionalism saves American amateurism. The American soldiers fighting in the Ardennes don't see it that way. They're the ones holding Bastogne against impossible odds. They're the ones stopping the German advance through sheer determination. Patton's Third Army turns 90 degrees north in 72 hours, a logistical miracle. By December 26th, Patton's forces break through to Bastogne. The German advance stalls. Not because of Montgomery's repositioning, because American troops bled for every inch of ground. But here's what's happening behind the scenes that changes everything. Montgomery cabled Churchill he planned to summon reporters to explain how the Germans were first headed off, then seen off, and now are written off. He intends to hold a press conference. His chief of intelligence, Brigadier Williams, asks why. Montgomery explains he wants to defend Eisenhower, who's being criticized in the British press. Williams offered 2 words of counsel: please don't. Others in Montgomery's headquarters smell condescension. They try to talk him out of it. Montgomery doesn't listen. He thinks he knows better. He always thinks he knows better. January 7, 1945, which brings us back to that press conference room in Zonhoven. Montgomery held a press conference at his headquarters in Belgium, lecturing without notes for an hour. He wears his signature maroon beret and parachute harness. Dressed like a clown, one correspondent later writes. Montgomery starts well. He praises the American GI as a very brave fighting man who has that tenacity in battle which makes a great soldier. He calls Eisenhower the captain of our team. He says, "I am absolutely devoted to Ike. We are the greatest of friends." Then he talks about himself. For half an hour, he describes how, when I took command, the first thing I did was busy myself in getting the battle area tidy, getting it sorted out. He explains how he employed British forces, how he organized the defense, how he saved the situation. He barely mentions Bradley, doesn't mention Patton at all, doesn't mention the American soldiers who held Bastogne, who stopped the German tanks, who died by the thousands in the snow. The reporters sit in stunned silence. This isn't a defense of Eisenhower. This is Montgomery taking credit for an American battle, for American blood. This is the moment. Everything Eisenhower built, the alliance, the command structure, the trust between British and American forces, it all balances on what happens next. The story reaches Versailles within hours. Eisenhower reads the transcript. His jaw clenches. His chief of staff later writes that he'd never seen Eisenhower that angry. But Eisenhower doesn't explode. Not yet. He waits for the inevitable. It comes the next day. Bradley calls. Very much upset over the big play-up Monty is getting in the British press, Eisenhower's secretary notes. Bradley had watched his armies fight and bleed. He'd coordinated the defense. He'd worked with Patton to turn the tide, and now Montgomery is claiming he saved them. Bradley twice called Versailles, privately denouncing Montgomery's attempt to discredit me so he could get control of the whole operation. The field marshal, Bradley asserts, wants to be in on the kill and no one else. Then the hammer falls. Bradley's voice is ice when he says it. I cannot serve under Montgomery. Not a complaint, an ultimatum. Patton calls separately, same message, more colorful language. 2 of America's most important generals threatening to resign. If Montgomery keeps command of American forces, if Eisenhower elevates him permanently, they walk. The American press is already brutal. Time magazine questions Eisenhower's leadership. American mothers whose sons died in the Bulge are furious. Now his own generals are in open revolt. Here's what everyone misses about this crisis. It's not really about Montgomery's press conference. It's about power. By January 1945, the balance has shifted irrevocably. America is producing more war material than the rest of the world combined. Britain is bankrupt, dependent on American lend-lease, dependent on American soldiers. The British Empire is dying. The American superpower is being born. But Montgomery doesn't see it. He's fighting 1945 with 1942 thinking. When he beat Rommel at El Alamein, Britain was still a great power. Now it's a junior partner. Eisenhower understands this. Bradley understands this. Patton understands this. Montgomery doesn't. So when Bradley says, I cannot serve under Montgomery, he's not being petty. He's stating reality. American forces outnumber British 30-1 in the Ardennes. American logistics keep the armies supplied. American factories produce the tanks and planes and bullets. Why should an American general serve under British command? Eisenhower faces an impossible choice. Montgomery is Britain's greatest general. Churchill backs him politically. The British press supports him. Removing him could fracture the alliance with Britain. But Bradley and Patton are irreplaceable. They're winning the war. American public opinion supports them. Lose them, lose public support for the war. The whole command structure could collapse. What happens next reveals everything about leadership. Eisenhower calls a meeting, not with Montgomery, with his British deputy, Air Marshal Tedder, and his chief of staff, Walter Bedell Smith. Eisenhower, encouraged by his British deputy, Tedder, was minded to sack Montgomery. Let that sink in. Eisenhower's British deputy suggests firing the British field marshal because Tedder knows the truth. Montgomery is destroying the alliance. His ego matters less than victory. But before Eisenhower can act, something unexpected happens. Montgomery's own chief of staff, Major General Freddie de Guingand, hears what's coming. He races to Versailles, meets with Bedell Smith privately. De Guingand understands what Montgomery doesn't. If this escalates, Montgomery loses. Not just command, his career, his reputation, everything. Intervention by Montgomery's and Eisenhower's chiefs of staff, Major General Freddie de Guingand and Lieutenant General Walter Bedell Smith, allowed Eisenhower to reconsider and Montgomery to apologize. De Guingand rushes back to Belgium, wakes Montgomery in the middle of the night, explains that Eisenhower is about to fire him, that Churchill can't save him, that American economic and military power gives Eisenhower the final word. Montgomery is shocked. For the first time, he realizes his mistake. He immediately writes to Eisenhower, a groveling apology. He never meant to claim credit. He was only trying to help. He respects American forces. He respects American commanders. It's humiliating, but it saves his career. Eisenhower accepts the apology, but the damage is permanent. Air Marshal Tedder informed his diary that cooperation between Bradley and the field marshal was now out of question. One British general reported that Bradley's contempt had grown into active hatred for Montgomery. For the rest of the war, Montgomery is sidelined. The Rhine crossing? Patton crosses first. The race to Berlin? American-led. Montgomery's grand northern offensive? Delayed indefinitely. Montgomery subsequently recognized his error and later wrote, "I think now that I should never have held that press conference. So great were the feelings against me on the part of the American generals that whatever I said was bound to be wrong. I should have, therefore, said nothing." Even in his apology, he blames others. The American generals were too sensitive. Whatever he said would be misinterpreted. Never, "I was wrong to take credit for American sacrifices." May 8, 1945, Germany surrenders. German troops in the Netherlands and Northwest Germany surrendered to Montgomery on May 4, 1945. He gets that final moment. But Eisenhower receives the main German surrender. Eisenhower becomes a hero. Eisenhower becomes President of the United States. Montgomery writes bitter entries in his diary about how he should have been Supreme Commander, how the war should have been fought differently, how Americans never understood real strategy. But here's what this story is actually about. It's not about World War II. It's about ego versus mission. Montgomery had everything going for him. Military genius, proven track record, Churchill's backing. But he couldn't subordinate his ego to the mission. He couldn't share credit. He couldn't accept that the world had changed, that Britain's power was fading, that American resources, not British tactics, would win the war. Eisenhower had something more valuable than Montgomery's tactical brilliance: self-awareness. Before D-Day, Eisenhower wrote a letter taking full responsibility if the invasion failed. He carried it in his pocket, ready to resign immediately. That humility made him unbreakable. Montgomery's arrogance made him fragile. Think about your own life. When things go wrong, what's your first instinct? Blame circumstances? Blame other people? Or look in the mirror? When things go right, do you take all the credit, or do you share it with the team? These patterns determine everything, not just in war, in business, in relationships, in leadership. Montgomery had more tactical skill than most generals in history, but Eisenhower had wisdom, the ability to put mission above ego, the understanding that real power comes from resources, loyalty, and legitimacy, not just rank and reputation. Churchill later wrote privately that Montgomery was often right about tactics, but Eisenhower was always right about what mattered. What matters in your life? Are you fighting for credit or fighting for the mission? Montgomery fought for credit. He won battles but lost the respect of the men who mattered. Eisenhower fought for victory. He shared credit generously. He managed difficult personalities. He kept the alliance together. History remembers both men, but only Eisenhower changed the world.
Montgomery became a warning, a cautionary tale about brilliant people who destroy themselves through ego, about leaders who don't understand that the world has changed, about commanders who think tactical victories matter more than strategic relationships. Winston Churchill, addressing the House of Commons following the Battle of the Bulge, said, "This is undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war and will, I believe, be regarded as an ever-famous American victory." Even Britain's Prime Minister understood what Montgomery didn't. Give credit where it's due, acknowledge sacrifice, build others up. Montgomery couldn't do it. That failure cost him everything. Want to know what Patton said when he heard about Montgomery's press conference? His response involved creative profanity and a specific plan for 10 minutes alone with Montgomery. That story's coming next, along with how Patton's ego nearly destroyed his own career in a completely different way. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. New history deep dives dropping regularly. The stories they never taught you in school.